today our event title is, can we really translate anything with just one API call? So before we start that, we need to know what is an API and what can we do with it. So let's begin. So what is even an API? As you can see, a guy is sitting here and running his code, and it is kind of extracting information from a server ready-made, and you can think API as a server. So for example, you ask something to the waiter in the menu, then he or she brings the food to you as per your request. So the whole workflow of a API is something like that. So in order to know an API is something called, full form is Application Programming Interface, which is kind of set of rules and specification that allows different software system to interact with each other so that they can exchange information, just like this whole restaurant management thing. So our API server has everything ready made, and our API will serve that information to us. So our client will make request, and the API will carry that request to the API server who has all the elements ready, and it will give us the request back, and we will get a response according to that. So after that, now that we know the workflow of an API, let's get to know why we should use an API. So as you know, many things are developing by day, so we do not need to build everything from the scratch. We can just take help from the API. As I said before, that the APIs are something that the systems can talk to each other and exchange information. So let's say the weather app that we use day to day, it helps us to access data on a daily basis, or the chatbot that we talk on regular basis with any queries like ChatGPT or Gemini, they are also kind of based on the API. So you very much know and familiar about the OpenAI API. So just like that, today we are going to see the Google Cloud Translation API, which is going to help us know how we can translate any text just by a simple API call. So like that, API uses you to access this information so that you can build something powerful. So API acts as a middleman who lets you use others people tool, and you can create a great product by the end of the day. So now that we know why we should use API, let's get to know something about the famous or popular API in the market. For the beginners, there can be 5 API that you can familiarize yourself on. The top one is OpenAPI. So it can do anything. You can fine tune yourself to any needs so that you can curate a good product. So full stack or any kind of mobile or iOS development you can build with OpenAPI call. So now that we are known with the first one, and the second one is pretty simple with the weather API. It helps you to access the weather information, like is it going to rain or not, like normal weather forecasting information. And moving on to the third one, the Translate API from the Google. It helps us to translate from any language to our designated language. For, let's say, I'm speaking English right now and I want to know something in Bengali, it will help me in that. In certain language or certain countries, when foreigners go, they use this API to translate their language with the native people there, so that they can have a good conversation and ask their queries. And moving on to the next one, which is Unsplash API, which helps you to use free images around the server or any kind of platform, which is very flexible. And on the last one, it is the Stripe API, which helps you to integrate the payment flow of your business or e-commerce platform, so that you can access the payments from the customers they made after that order. So now that we know what is an API, for like it is a waiter and you give command or request something, it gives you handmade, ready-made, all ingredients are already exercised by them and they gives you by a end product good result. So let's know some tips that we need to know before we start an API. So some tips from pro tips from few, which is never expose your API key publicly, because if you use or show your key in some way, then the information will get leaked and someone else will use your key and security breach will occur and you might end up with many usage bills. So do not do that. Never expose your key. It is suggested to create a env or environment file locally in your deployment folder, then host it so that you can keep control of the app so that no one can access your information and or misuse it. Now moving on to the second point, which is read the documentation. They save lives. You see, if you do not read the documentation, then you will suffer. There are some certain rules and guidelines that are given in the API manual so that you can understand that which information are required for a certain kind of API. For example, if you do not read the documentation of the Stripe API, you wouldn't know that it is a payment API which helps you to integrate payments seamlessly into a server or a website or a e-commerce platform. So you have to keep that in mind. So it is very wise to use the API in accordance to the documentation. And moving on to the last point, we can use Postman, which is very popular API hosting service where we can exercise many kinds of things and test our understanding of API. So that would be all for in general what is an API. Now let's move on to our today's task or the lab, which is to translate anything, just one API call. Let's see. So today we are going to perform a Google Cloud self-paced lab where we can see how we can translate text with Cloud Translation API, which is one of the APIs that I mentioned will help us in translation. Now as it is a self-paced, you can also follow along with me while performing this lab. So let's get started. So let's follow along. Now that we are here, so let's do this. So now that we are logged in here, now we will start the API thing. So as you can see, it is a very introductory lab and which will help us to more advanced, or what can I say, give us a bit deep understanding of the whole API working. So our main objective today of this lab is doing to create an API key and translate the text and detect the language. So I'm performing this lab from the Google Cloud Skill Boost platform, so we can just follow along with me so that you can keep a company or a buddy while doing it. So let's create our API key, but before that we have to activate the GCP. So let's open the Cloud Console. So give me a moment. We have to do it in a private tab. So let's do this. At a moment, let me switch my tab. So let's get started to our today's work. So we are now in the Google Cloud platform or the dashboard where the magic happens. So our very task from the start would be to create an API key. So let's do that. So in order to do so, before that we need to activate our Cloud Shell, which is the terminal which will help us to activate the environment here, because the Google Cloud is helping us to use this neural machine. So it is kind of a virtual machine, the Cloud Shell that I am activating, which is loaded with development tools. It will help us to keep persistent 5 GB home directory, which is running on Google Cloud currently. So it is kind of giving us command line access to the Google Cloud resources. So after that we collected or activated the Google Cloud Shell, we will see that it will ask us to authorize, and I have to authorize it. So now that we have authorized it, we have to set the project. So in order to do so, let's put this command Google Cloud config set project, and the project ID I'm just going to simply copy and paste it here. So it is kind of done. Now that we have configured our project, and we need to see what are the accounts that are currently running in the account. So let's do that. I'm simply going to paste it here, the command. So in order to do so, we have to set the account active, but I think the account is active because we can see the account active and the account name. And to set active account, run this command. So we can also see this in action if you want to. Let's do that. Let's see if anything happens. So let's do that. And the account is student.net. Wait, it got broken. But sorry for being clumsy. I'm just a girl. Set account. Writing in terminal is hard. Now that we have done, most probably it didn't change anything, but I think it is we did something redundant which was not required. Now let's create the API key. So before that, we have to set the region where we are creating the virtual machine here. We can do that, but we can also skip that, but I'm going to do it anyway. So it is now kind of computing. Now let's create the API key. So we need to go to the navigation bar again, and click API services. As you can see, there are many kinds of API services we can enable. For example, the one that we are looking is Google Cloud Translation API. Let's go maximize. Try this API. So as you can see, the documentation, it is showing us how we can simply use it, and the service point, and lots of information that will help us to create, delete or post requests or get requests from the APIs. But let's see the uses here. There are client libraries, and we can also use it in REST condition. They are kind of basic and advanced also. Let's see this one, API access. We can also see the local deployment. For local deployment, we need to set up just this after installing the Google Cloud. Here it is kind of initializing the Google Cloud, and so that will help us to run the Google Cloud from the CLI, which is command line interface. Then we can do the request, but that is not our agenda now. Right now, let's go to here. Let's see, can minimize it. So as you can see, it is kind of not free to use. It is $45 per hour. I don't think we will be able to do this with our project today because I'm just a student. I cannot manage this, but let's see how we can create the API key. Let's go back. Now I want to create an API. So right here, as you can see, I can see the traffic, how many people are accessing my service or giving requests to the API. I can see that, and also the errors and the latency rate. Also there are lots of API and over here in GCP which you can explore if you have the GCP membership. So right now let's just create the key. So I don't think we need this for this lab, but we are just simply creating the key. So we just need to go to the credential part. Before that, we need to go to the API service from the navigation menu. Now that we are here, we just create a credential key, just API key. Identify your project using a simple API key to check your quota and access. So I'm going to select that one. This is creating an API key. I don't know which. Oh, it is very long, but I'm not going to show. As you can see, it will be blurred it out after I edit it, but let's copy it and close it. Now let's head back to our terminal and export this key. So export. We can also do one thing. Here you can see the name of the key is API key 1. We can also change it to anything. So let's change it to API 1. API 1 just for the short. Access. So now the naming format for exporting the API key here in the terminal is just API all in caps lock, then underscore key, then equal to, then the variable naming that we gave just right now. So API underscore 1. It exported by. So let's see whether we can test the premium version. As I said before, it is kind of $45 per hour. Let's see if it works or not. I'm kind of skeptical about the whole thing. So let's paste the command here. And please let me know if I'm doing it wrong. Do let me know. As you can see, I'm not able to call this command because I'm not authorized here. So the method does not allow unauthorized callers without identity. So if my API was allowing me to access that information, I could have accessed it. But as you can see, the reason is forbidden, permission is denied, so I cannot do it. Sorry guys, but this is the basic protocol of doing so. So it will. So now that we saw that it doesn't work in the terminal, the CLI, they say the response should look like this. The access is denied, and I do not know if I did something wrong, but if I did, please do let me know. And moving on to the task 3, I think if task 2 didn't work, task 3 also won't work because it's the same thing. So I'm not going to do this again, but you get the idea. So if we execute this barf script and our API was accessed or not forbidden, if it had permission, the response should have looked like this. It would detect and also translate. Both of the tasks would have been possible if they access us one, not blocked or forbidden by the terminal or the server. So because of that, we could not perform it. So yeah. now that we know how we can create a key, translate and text, and how we can detect the text, the format, so we know the procedure. We know three things from today's lab. So by the end of this video or the lab, we know how to run a Cloud Shell or the GCP dashboard, and how can we run it up, and also how we can set up the API key just because we created an API key step by step, and how to export that key so that we can run it, and also know the format or the algorithm to translate and text, also detect in language. So we are now pro in API knowledge. So congratulations for today's lab. We will surely do another lab like this, and let's stay together and learn together.